The house on Willow Creek Lane stood silent, its tall frame casting a crooked shadow as the sun dipped behind the hills. For Sarah and her little brother Jacob, it was supposed to be a new beginning. After their parents' sudden passing, their Aunt Meredith had taken them in, moving them into the old Victorian home she'd inherited but never lived in. From the outside, the house looked regal, ornate wooden trims, stained glass windows, a wraparound porch. But inside it whispered with age. The floorboards creaked beneath every step. The walls groaned at night as if sighing with memories no one wanted to remember. "Is that the attic?" Jacob asked, pointing to the ceiling hatch in the hallway. Aunt Meredith stiffened. "Yes," she said quickly, "but it stays closed. There's nothing up there but dust and mice." Sarah noticed the way her aunt's voice trembled. Just a little. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah lay awake in the dark. The wind howled outside, but inside the house, something else stirred. Then she heard it, a faint whisper, almost like her name being called, drawn out in a breathy murmur. It was coming from above. From the attic. Sarah tried to tell herself it was just the wind. Old houses made strange sounds all the time. Everyone knew that. But the whisper wasn't random or distant. It was deliberate. It had shape. It almost sounded like, "Sarah!" She sat up in bed, heart hammering. The sound had clearly come from the ceiling, right above her. She stared at the darkened corner where the attic hatch sat closed. It hadn't moved. Not even an inch. Ting. The next morning at breakfast, she brought it up casually. "Does this house make voices at night?" Aunt Meredith's spoon froze midair. "What did you hear?" "Nothing," Sarah lied. "Just weird creaks, I guess." Jacob perked up. "I heard it too. Last night. Someone was talking up there." Aunt Meredith slammed her spoon down. "No one is talking. There's no one up there." Her voice cracked, then softened. "This house is old. Your imaginations are just adjusting." Later that afternoon, Sarah stood beneath the attic hatch. She reached up and placed her hand on the cord. Just to see, it felt ice cold. From above, the whisper came again, clearer this time, closer. "Come up." Sarah stepped back, breath caught in her throat. It knew she was listening. That night, Sarah dreamed of the attic. She was floating toward it, weightless and silent, as the hatch creaked open by itself. Inside was darkness, endless and alive. A whisper echoed from within, calling her name over and over like a lullaby sung in reverse. She woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. Downstairs, Aunt Meredith was sipping tea, her eyes red-rimmed as if she hadn't slept at all. "Aunt Meredith," Sarah began, "what's really in the attic?" Her aunt didn't answer at first. Then quietly she said, "Nothing that concerns you." But Sarah noticed the tremble in her hands. Later that day, when her aunt went out to run errands, Sarah began to search. She started in the study, where old books and yellowing papers filled dusty shelves. Behind a loose panel in the desk drawer, she found it, a small, rusted key. It had a tiny A etched into the metal. She knew immediately what it was for. With Jacob peeking nervously around the corner, Sarah stood under the attic hatch and pulled the cord. The wooden ladder creaked as it unfolded. "I don't think we should," Jacob whispered. Sarah didn't answer. She held up the key. The lock on the attic hatch was old, but it turned with a loud click. Something above shifted. The air changed. The attic was waiting. The hatch groaned as it opened fully, releasing a musty wave of air that smelled like rot and forgotten time. Sarah hesitated, her hand gripping the key tightly as the wooden ladder wobbled beneath her feet. Jacob clutched the bottom rung. "Just look, then come back down. Don't stay." "I won't," Sarah lied. With a deep breath, she climbed up. The attic was cloaked in shadows, lit only by the weak glow from the hallway below. Cobwebs draped across the beams like curtains. Broken furniture, trunks, and strange, dust-covered shapes loomed like silent witnesses. As she stepped fully inside, the air grew colder. Her breath began to fog, and then she heard it again. "Sarah, You're here." She froze. It hadn't come from behind her. It hadn't come from the shadows. It had come from within the room. She turned slowly, and that's when she saw it. A child-sized rocking chair in the corner, swaying gently back and forth on its own. On the floor beside it, a single worn doll sat slumped over, its glass eyes staring directly at her. Then the whisper came again, but this time it wasn't a voice. It was a laugh, high-pitched, hollow, and very, very close. Sarah backed away from the rocking chair, but her foot hit a loose board, and she stumbled. The doll hadn't moved, but something about it felt wrong, like it had just finished looking away before she turned. She knelt cautiously, drawn by a sudden urge to inspect it. The doll was old, porcelain face cracked, its dress yellowed with age. But what chilled her was the stitched name sewn into the collar. Clara. The name sent a jolt through her. It was the same name carved faintly into the attic beams above. Clara, Clara, Clara. The whispers began again. This time they weren't calling Sarah's name. They were chanting the doll's. Suddenly, behind her, the attic door slammed shut. "Sarah!" Jacob's muffled voice cried from below. "What happened?" She scrambled to the hatch and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. From the outside? "No, no, no," she muttered, heart racing. She turned back to the attic. The rocking chair was no longer moving. The doll was gone. In its place was a trail of small, dusty footprints leading deeper into the shadows. They weren't hers, and they were still fresh. Sarah followed the footprints, her hands trembling. They were small, too small to belong to any living child. Her flashlight flickered against the piles of forgotten trunks and old clothes. A sudden giggle echoed, darting from one corner to another. Sarah whipped around. "Clara!" No answer. But then she saw it. A cracked mirror leaning against the wall. In its reflection, something moved quickly behind her. She spun around. Nothing. But in the mirror, a little girl stood, her face blurred, her eyes empty hollows. "Do you want to play?" The whisper slithered from the air. Sarah backed towards the hatch again. She pounded on it. "Jacob, open it, please!" No response. In the attic, something scuttled toward her. Fast. She turned back to the mirror. The girl's smile widened unnaturally. "Tag, you're it!" Sarah stumbled away from the mirror, her heart thundering. The voice was everywhere now. Above her, behind her, inside her ears. "Tag, you're it! You're it!" She crashed into a stack of boxes, sending papers and toys scattering across the attic floor. A music box clicked open, its ballerina spinning to a slow, eerie tune. The same one her mother used to hum. But this one sounded warped, backwards. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept across her neck, and she felt breath, as if someone was right behind her. She turned, swinging the flashlight wildly, but it fizzled and died. Total darkness swallowed the attic. Then, scratch, scratch, scratch. Tiny fingernails scraping across the wooden walls, getting closer. Sarah groped in the dark, her fingers brushing something soft. Cloth. It was the doll. It was back. But now its porcelain face had changed. The cracked mouth had been carved wider, the smile unnatural. Blood-red threads replaced its old stitches. "Found you," Clara whispered. And then the attic began to shake. The entire attic quivered as if the house itself had taken a deep breath. Dust rained from the rafters, and boxes slid across the floor as the doll in Sarah's hand suddenly felt warm. Alive. She threw it. It hit the floor with a thud and rolled, lifeless again. But the moment it stopped, the attic walls changed. The wooden beams darkened, the mirror cracked, and on its surface, images appeared, moving like film on old burning celluloid. Sarah saw a girl, Clara. She was sitting in the attic, cradling the same doll. Behind her stood a tall figure, shrouded in shadow. Clara's mouth moved, as if begging for something. Then the shadow's hand reached out, too long, too thin, and placed it on Clara's head. The image flashed white, then faded. Sarah gasped. The whispers were louder now, hundreds of them overlapping, pleading. Find us! Trapped! He took us! The attic door suddenly creaked open. Light flooded in from below. Jacob stood at the bottom of the ladder, pale and shaking. I didn't open it, he whispered. Sarah didn't ask questions. She grabbed his hand and climbed down. But just before the hatch closed on its own, Sarah heard one last whisper, cold and unmistakable. You brought her back. Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the ceiling where the attic hatch loomed, shut again but never silent. She could still hear faint noises, not whispers now, but something heavier, movement, like footsteps. She knew Clara hadn't stayed behind. The next morning, she returned to the study. She began digging through old files, newspaper clippings, anything that could explain what happened in the house. After nearly an hour, she found it. A brittle page, yellowed and half-torn, from a 1923 local paper. Child disappears in locked attic. Parents say doll possessed. The name beneath the photo, Clara Whitmore, age 8. The article ended with a haunting detail. The girl was never found, though authorities discovered deep claw marks beneath the floorboards. Sarah's heart sank. She looked up at the floor, at the spot directly beneath the attic, the living room. Without telling Jacob, she went down and pulled back the rug. There, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, she found them. Tiny scratch marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds. And in the center, a small, broken tooth. The moment she touched it, her vision blurred, and a shriek erupted from inside the walls. Clara wasn't haunting the attic. She was trying to get out. Sarah's hand recoiled from the broken tooth. Her pulse raced, and she could hear her breath grow shallow. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch, elongating toward her like hands reaching out of the corners. The shriek from the walls intensified, so sharp it made her ears ring. "Clara!" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you want?" Suddenly, the floor beneath her groaned, and a crack appeared, running from one side of the room to the other. The crack spread wider, as though something was forcing its way up through the floorboards from below. Sarah backed away slowly, but her feet were glued to the floor as the ground split wider. A hand, pale, brittle, and covered in dust, emerged from the crack. It was small, delicate, but there was no mistaking its intentions. It was reaching for her. She turned to run, but the room seemed to warp around her. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The shadows pressed in tighter, and the crawling hand was no longer alone. Dozens of them, thin, bony hands, began to claw their way up from beneath the floor, followed by pale faces. Faces that were twisted in agony, eyes wide with terror. Clara's laugh echoed through the room again, a high-pitched, manic giggle that made Sarah's skin crawl. Then a voice, soft but clear, came from behind her. "You shouldn't have come." Sarah spun around. Standing in the doorway was Aunt Meredith, her face as pale as the hands that now crawled towards Sarah. "What do you mean?" Sarah whispered, panic flooding her chest. Aunt Meredith stepped forward, her eyes empty. The attic was never meant to be opened. Clara is not the only one trapped in this house. The walls closed in. Aunt Meredith's footsteps echoed louder in the narrowing room. The crawling hands paused, their bony fingers twitching in anticipation, as if sensing the shift in the air. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Aunt Meredith's voice was soft but chilling. "The real secret of this house." Sarah's heart pounded. She backed away, her feet scrambling for purchase, as the shadows closed in around her. "No," Sarah whispered, shaking her head. "No, I don't understand. What do you mean?" Aunt Meredith's expression softened, but there was something unsettling about her calm. "You opened it, Sarah. You broke the barrier." She motioned to the crawling hands. "Clara isn't the only one who's been trapped here." The hands, now more numerous, began to scratch at the walls, leaving deep gouges in the plaster. The pale faces emerged fully, their eyes dull and hollow, locked in a stare of unrelenting torment. "The house feeds on what's lost," Aunt Meredith continued, her voice hollow, "and it's never enough. Clara was the first, but she wasn't alone. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save them. And now you've joined us." Sarah's stomach churned as she backed toward the window. "What are you talking about?" she cried. "Who else is trapped here?" Aunt Meredith raised her hand, and with a flick of her fingers, the shadows parted. In the space before Sarah, a shape began to materialize. Slowly at first, then more clearly. It was a woman, bent and twisted, her body writhing like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. It was her mother. "No, it couldn't be. Mom," Sarah whispered in disbelief. But the figure didn't answer. Its mouth opened wide, stretching unnaturally, as if it were trying to speak. But no sound came. Instead, the empty eyes turned towards Sarah, pleading, begging. The hands moved again, faster now, more violently as they reached for her. Aunt Meredith's cold smile never wavered. "You see, Sarah, your mother was the last to be trapped. She's been here all along." A cold realization washed over Sarah like a wave. The attic wasn't just a place of torment. It was the source, the heart of everything. Every soul trapped within the house was linked to it. And now, Sarah was one of them. The hands reached for her, pulling at her legs, trying to drag her toward the darkening corner of the room. She struggled, her mind racing. She had to get out. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps as the hands closed around her ankles, pulling her toward the shadowy corner of the room. The once familiar walls now seemed like an endless abyss, and the faces, pale and twisted, leered at her from every angle. "No, no, I won't," she cried, struggling against the grip of the bony fingers. Her heart raced as she realized the horrible truth. There was no escaping. This house had claimed her, and she was no different from the others now. Aunt Meredith stepped forward, her cold eyes never leaving Sarah. "It's too late," she whispered. "You opened the door, Sarah. You set them free." The shadowy figures in the corner began to move, coalescing into a single mass. And then, as though summoned by the house itself, Clara's twisted form appeared in the center of it all. She smiled at Sarah, her face grotesque, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Clara!" Sarah croaked, her voice barely audible. Clara's lips parted, her voice a whisper that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "We're all here now, Sarah. We were waiting. For you." The faces behind Clara began to speak in unison, their voices melding into a chilling chorus. "You brought us back. You're one of us now." The walls groaned and the air thickened. The floor beneath Sarah's feet gave way, crumbling into nothingness as the room descended into darkness. And then, just as the darkness swallowed her whole, Sarah heard one last whisper, faint and distant. "Welcome home."